Namo Amitabha Buddha. Hello everyone. So in our last video, we talked about the three poisons generally, greed, anger, and ignorance, and why they are really the root cause of our suffering. And in this video, I'd like to share a bit more about greed and see how greed actually get manifested in different aspects of our life, and more importantly, what we can do to overcome it. So if we can remember the Four Noble Truths that we discussed much earlier, the second Noble Truth says that craving is the root of suffering. So craving or greed or attachment, this means the same thing. Sometimes when we feel suffered, it's most likely that because we have attachment towards something or some people or some kind of phenomena, so all sorts of attachment that will lead to suffering. So why do we have the craving, the greed, and attachment? So we know that we have the six roots, the six eternal sense bases. We have our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our body, and mind. And these six eternal sense bases also correspond to six external sense bases, also known as the six gunas. So the eyes correspond to the form or the objects we see, and the ears correspond to the sound we hear, and the nose corresponds to the smell, the tongue corresponds to the taste, the body corresponds to the touch, and the mind corresponds to ideas. So when the six eternal sense bases come in contact with the six external sense bases, immediately it can give rise to thoughts of attachment and separation, especially if we lack of mindfulness wisdom, which we discussed this briefly in our previous video. So when our eyes see something really beautiful, like a beautiful object, if we go shopping, we see really nice things, it can give rise to the thoughts of desire, craving, or possession. And when our ear hears a beautiful sound, it can also give rise to craving, like we want to hear more. If our nose smells a pleasant smell, it can also give rise to craving that we want to smell more. When our tongue tastes something like delicious food, then we want to eat more. When our body touches something that we feel nice, we may want to touch more. And also our mind can be attached to the ideas, the thoughts of greed, the thoughts of attachment. So these are all kinds of attachment that actually can create a lot of suffering in our life. So Buddha is not saying that we can't hear beautiful sound, we can't smell beautiful smell, we can't eat delicious food, or we can't see beautiful things. So Buddha is not saying that. There is nothing wrong with appreciating the beauty in life, but it's really the attachment of this that creates a problem. It's the attachment to all this phenomena that creates suffering in us, because all it's impermanent. Again, there's just absolutely nothing that we can grab hold of forever. So that is why we can appreciate things, but it's just we can't be attached. We can't crave for it. We can't be greedy of it, because it's likely that we might not get what we want. Or even if we get what we want, we may want more. You know, our desire could just be endless. And this endless desire can really cause a lot of suffering on us, because we cannot always get what we want. And not to get what we want is exactly one of the 8 types of sufferings that Buddha speaks about in this world. So in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha tells us, all of you should take no pleasure in dwelling in the burning house of the 3 realms. Do not lust after vulgar and evil forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and tangible objects. If you attach to them greedily and give rise to love for them, you will be burned. You should quickly escape the 3 realms and attain the 3 vehicles, the Hira, Pratyeka Buddha, and the Buddha vehicles. So the 3 realms are also like the 6 realms of reincarnation, which can also be grouped into the 3 realms. The desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm, which I'll do another video about this. So in the Lotus Sutra, the metaphor the Buddha used is that we are like these children playing in this burning house and not aware that the house is actually on fire. So we sentient beings are here not being aware that we are actually constantly being burned by the fire of desire, the fire of greed, the fire of anger, the fire of ignorance. And that is why we suffered so much in the cycle of reincarnation. The three vehicles really means the three types of enlightenment. But what exactly are we craving for in this material world? In the sutras, the Buddha also talk about the 5 desires. The first being wealth, and second is lust, and third is fame, and the fourth is eating, and the fifth is sleeping. So again, Buddha is not saying that we can't possess any money at all, we can't eat, we can't sleep. Buddha is not saying that. It's not the extreme path, it's really the middle path. But what Buddha is saying is not to be attached to this. It's really the attachment, the over-attachment, over-indulgence in all these 5 things that bring us suffering. So for instance, wealth. If one becomes very much attached to wealth, that he might be constantly worried about his wealth, his possessions. So instead of owning his wealth, he really becomes the slave of his possession. Also for someone who becomes very much attached to wealth, to money, then they may think of all kinds of ways to obtain money, including perhaps illegal ways. So we see a lot of crimes in the news that are committed behind the motivation of greed for wealth. So this is dangerous. And even for people who want to seek rebirth to the Pure Land, it is also important one is not over-attached to money. And there was actually a failed rebirth case because the person was very much attached to the gold in his safe. So at the time of death, he was actually thinking about the gold in his safe instead of being mindful of Amitabha Buddha. So he missed the chance for rebirth. So this is also really important, that for near-full practitioners, we shall not be too much attached to wealth. It's fine, we can possess some wealth, we do need some money to survive, but make sure that we are not over-attached to it. And second is lust. Attachment to lust really leads to a lot of problems in this world. Like I've discussed before, if one becomes very much attached to lust, it could lead to all kinds of diseases, STDs, in serious case AIDS, maybe unwanted abortions, adultery, family relationship breakdowns, and also in serious cases, rape and murder. If we watch the news every day, we might also realize a lot of crimes were actually committed due to lust, due to the craving for lust. So this is actually quite serious and it should not be overlooked. And also for people who want to seek rebirth to the Pure Land, it's also important that we don't have strong attachment to lust. Because as we saw, there was a failed rebirth case because the man was very much attached to his young wife. So instead of being mindful of Amitabha Buddha, he was actually kind of mindful of his young wife, and he failed to seek rebirth to the Pure Land. And third, attachment to fame. Of course, this will also lead to suffering. If one is very worried about what others might perceive him or her, and then this will create afflictions and suffering. And also one cannot be famous forever, right? Or it's impermanent. So attachment to fame will also lead to suffering. Attachment to eating. So this one is also quite obvious. If we are so much attached to food, this will lead to a lot of health problems on our physical health, also mental health and spiritual well-being. So it's also important that we are not over-attached to food. Just keep our desire in check and keep everything in moderation. And attachment to sleep. Some people may not understand this one. When I first looked at it, I also was a little bit unsure. Then I really realized how attachment to sleep could also lead to many problems. Of course, we should have sufficient sleep to keep us in good energy, but if we overindulge in sleep, like for instance, you sleep through like half of the day, you wake up at maybe 11, 12 o'clock, oversleep can lead to laziness and drowsiness, and which leads to ignorance. And also, if you sleep so much every day, you can't really accomplish anything, right? So attachment to sleep is also a problem. So how to overcome them is probably not easy to overcome them, as we've discussed. All these poisons we've had it, like we contracted this kind of viruses since time immemorial. And we all know how difficult it is to overcome our bad habits. So it really requires conscious effort. It requires us to have this awareness, this mindfulness, that we can actually identify our own greed, our own craving. If we can't identify them, then we can't change them. It's only when we can identify it and we really have the willingness to change our behaviors, then this can make it possible. Also, to overcome greed, one can practice giving, particularly, for instance, greed for wealth. By giving out our wealth, then it makes us become less attached to our material possession. So it's not really about just giving out money or wealth, but it is really about changing our attitude from selfish desire to become more generous, to not to be attached to our material possessions. So there's no coincidence that in the 6 parameters, the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva, the first on the list is generosity, dana. So by cultivating generosity, the Bodhisattvas overcome the poison of greed. So I'll do another video about the power of giving and how by giving out what we have, we actually gain more. And of course, practicing Nianfo. Practicing Nianfo is, I find, perhaps one of the most effective way to help us overcome greed, overcome all different poisons actually. So by transforming all our negative attachment to the 5 desires, to all these poisons, mental defilements, we transform all of this to the name of Amitabha Buddha, to infinite light, to infinite life, to our awakened nature. If there is any kind of right attachment, then this would be the right attachment. By practicing Nianfo, reciting the name of Amitabha Buddha repeatedly can help us overcome our attachment to greed. Maybe not to the point of extinguish the poison completely, because we are not enlightened yet, but what we can do is to bring it under control and to transform all our attachment to greed, to all the 5 desires, to the name of Amitabha Buddha. So in the next video, we'll explore the other types of mental defilements, anger and ignorance, and what we can do to overcome them. Namo Amituofo Buddha. Namo Amituofo.